I almost wanted to ask Norm whether or not he got home early or late last night. Well, I'm excited to be here, and I'm going to moderate a conversation amongst these two amazing leaders, particularly around the topic of leadership and what's required, particularly today, required around transformative change and what we can do to spur more action. Mary heads a very progressive utility. As a matter of fact, I'm looking forward to learning more about the beyond net zero efforts and aspiration that you all have. Your utility is committed to actually decarbonizing by 2045, which is not anything light or easy to do. So very much looking forward to hearing from you, Mary. I don't know if folks know this about Ada, but Ada actually, we think of her collectively in the built environment in Seattle as a powerhouse. She has led the effort as the chief real estate officer around 13 million square feet of development, actually in and around us. Isn't that right?
Not far.
Not far.
Just to the east.
Just over the last couple of decades around South Lake Union, for you all that are walking around, beautiful area that's been redeveloped. Actually, Vulcan was on the ground floor of really supporting and starting the Green Sports Alliance. Isn't that right? You all were right there.
That's correct, with our ownership of the Seattle Seahawks and the Portland Trailblazers. This has been a long-term value for the Paul Allen as well as the Allen estate now. Real champions of sustainability and environmental stewardship.
Yeah, well, your buildings, every single one of them, including the team, has always reflected those values. So thank you so much to both of you for being here. Looking forward to hearing from both of you. I've got a list of 55 questions. I think we have 20 minutes, so we're gonna boogie here. Hey, Mary, ambiguity is kind of a topic here. In many ways, there are folks that are waiting to see what will happen. They're kind of standing on the sideline. It doesn't seem possible for an investor-owned utility today that's contending with both regulatory and social norms that you have to contend with. I mentioned already that you'd already made a commitment to decarbonize, actually in a very short amount of time. Kind of intimidating, right? 20 years for a utility, that's pretty quick. Including, more electrification, to decarbonize, more pressure on the grid. Even mandates around equity have become a focal point. So all this while we're trying to figure out what to do over 10, 20, 30 years. So how do you push past the ambiguity? How did you all get to this beyond net zero carbon aspiration?
So to requote a requote of this morning, winning slowly is not winning, right?
Yeah,
especially when it comes to climate. And I that's a huge takeaway for me. So I came to PSC in part because Washington State has some of the most progressive climate laws in the country. And I thought, I want to play some small role in trying to help this be successful so that we can then be the model that others can use to show that we can do this quickly, we can do this affordably, and we can do it equitably. Mm-hmm. So, for example, our Beyond Net Zero carbon goal, part of that is that we need to comply with the laws, and as Ash suggested, we need to be completely carbon-free by 2045. We're well on our way. By 2025, we'll have gone from 32% clean resources to 63%. So we're doing this now, and we need to do it incrementally. But the other part of that goal is really saying, how can we go beyond what's required in the law? How can we really drive and make a difference? So there are a number of ways we're doing that, partnering with members of the community, and we're always looking for new ways. So ideas that come from you are equally important. But one thing we're doing is helping decarbonize transport, because Washington is fortunate to have such a profound amount of hydro, although it is limited. Actually, one of our biggest sources of carbon in this state is transport. So we're big on EV charging partnerships, and recently we've announced a partnership with the Seattle ferry system to actually electrify 8 of their ports. So we're really excited about that. Another thing we're doing that hasn't been without controversy, but we also have a liquefied natural gas facility, which is actually used to help decarbonize shipping, replacing high sulfur diesel between here and Alaska. So trying to do a small part to help our oceans there too.
Mary, just a very quick follow-up. The utility, is, I mean this respectfully, just like the industry we're in, is relatively slow-moving. So how within PSC did you set the tone around change?
Yeah, you mentioned urgency, and not only are utilities slow-moving, and I'm not insulted by that, it's how we are. We're cultures of engineers, and we want to make sure we have everything to the 5th decimal point, and we sometimes get stuck in a Mobius strip and don't make progress. But one of the things that we did at PSC is we took a look at ourselves internally, and we took a look at all of our processes and all of our procedures. Some, especially as they relate to safety and keeping the systems running, are super important. But others of them had just kind of become process for process's sake. So we've taken a hard look at what work actually needs to be done, and we've also reorganized ourselves so that we can not only keep the trains running, but really move forward on clean energy, because it can't be someone's part-time job. It has to be a full-time job.
Yeah, well, I would just say for those of you that are either at the start or the middle part of your journey, I think if a progressive utility like PSC can take on that aspiration, I think we all can do some pretty amazing things. Hey, Ada, this time is of the essence topic is really interesting. To decarbonize the built environment is pretty essential to the climate crisis. I forget the numbers, but 40% of the harm that goes into the environment is really related to the built environment, maybe more or less. I read this study recently. You'll have to trust me because I'm not going to read out what the ACEEE is, but trust me, it's a real organization. And I thought this was really quite interesting. Did you know that at the current rate that we're going, with carrots and sticks, I'm not sure if we're doing more carrots or sticks, it's going to take 50 years to perform the refits to the commercial built environment. Now here, get this, 300 years to deal with both commercial and residential. I mean, it's just absolutely stunning. So what are we going to do, Ada, to spur faster action? And as a side note, particularly considering that we've got a pretty significant vacancy rate in commercial office right now.
Well, let me start with the good news. Our large customers are all on board with decarbonization. We've seen a material shift in what they want, how they think about their climate footprint, and all of our new office buildings are going to be essentially electric buildings. And so we've made a commitment to that, and our customers want it, and so that makes it much easier. And I think the other good news is when the big customers want it, then you see it trickling down to middle market customers and essentially the entire customer base, and it becomes more of a standard versus something special or unique. And so I think that is a very positive, fairly recent development. In terms of how we can move faster, I mean, of course, 300 years and 50 years is too long, right? So what we're doing now is not working. So we have to amp up the carrots, and we probably have to amp up the sticks a little bit as well. I mean, Seattle has a new energy code, which was passed. It's called the 2018 Energy Code, and I would tell you, our new buildings are subject to that code, and it is a lot more expensive. But we've embraced it, and our customers, if they want a new building, they're gonna need to embrace it as well in terms of the cost premium associated with that. What I would say about existing buildings, in the City of Seattle Sustainability Office, along with the UW Integrated Design Lab, has a study on their website, and it essentially looks at a typical 55,000 square foot building and looks at how you transition to a fully electric building, and it's about $1 million to do that. And the payback, setting aside who gets the money, whether it's the tenant or the landlord, is roughly a 4% return on investment. And to get the private sector, whether it's the tenant or the landlord, to move forward with that process, we've either got to buy down the capital costs with some government incentives, or we have to amp up the return on investment. And I only cite it because it's a study that's on the city's website, but I think you're going to need some government involvement there to help bridge that gap and motivate the private sector. The other thing I would add is the city of Seattle. I don't know whether Mayor Harrell talked about this yesterday, but they have come out and committed to decarbonize their buildings by 2035, which is fantastic because then they're on the cutting edge. They're setting the standard. They're creating a model that they will share with the private sector, such that we can learn from what they've gotten right and perhaps where they've stubbed their toe. And this is really important as well for the private sector to be able to make these investments.
Do you think that the current vacancy issues that we have in commercial office buildings are going to slow, or do you think that it's going to offer us a transformative kind of point?
Well, I think there's some buildings out in the market that are not going to make it. They need to be repurposed or torn down, and that's good news long term. If you happen to own one of those buildings, it's a tough tough market reality. But I do think over the longer term that's going to accelerate our progress to more sustainable building product.
Yeah, that's a really good point. No, just before I get back to Mary, I went on the affordability thing. At McKinstry, we think of the climate crisis, the equity crisis, and the affordability crisis, all both professional and moral obligations of the company. Affordability is a real issue in the built environment. Ada knows this mostly because our industry has lacked the gain of productivity over time. So it is unfortunate that to actually make the built environment better, we still haven't found ways of becoming ever more effective at doing that. I think that is also part of the challenge to make these returns better that you very clearly articulate. Because I don't think at the current affordability and productivity, we're going to be able to do it fast enough or make it affordable. That seems like a challenge.
No, it's a significant challenge, and technology I think is a resource to help us get there, and we're craving new ideas for different technologies, and we have a lot of people come and pitch us on new ideas, and I'm sure everybody in the audience does as well. And the first question we ask is, okay, can we see it? Can we understand how it's performed? And oftentimes there's not many, if any, examples. And as a fiduciary, and I know everybody in the audience is a financial fiduciary as well, it's very difficult to make a large bet on something that is not proven. I think it's much easier to make a more modest or measured bet, and we have tried to do that everywhere we could. But I think having again the public sector pilot some of these ideas that are perhaps not bankable from a private sector fiduciary perspective is going to be a significant key to help us moving the needle here.
Yeah, it's a really excellent point. Hey, Mary, I want to geek out a little bit. I'm an engineer, so I can't help myself. The grid itself, and particularly as it gets to serving energy to stadiums and my house and your house and the commercial buildings that Ada's delivering, at that meter, there is this stopping point. And yet it seems that to really solve for the problems, especially as we're decarbonizing and electrifying ever more, we're going to have to rethink where these boundary conditions exist. Folks, Mary didn't say that she you were at El Paso for a long time.
I was.
I was listening to issues going on in Texas and was partially thinking of you. But, it's really dire. If there's not a lot of flexing of the load and all the utilities can do is say, please conserve,
Yeah.
that's actually not going to work for us long term, is it? I mean, should we be thinking differently about the energy value chain and the relationship between the utility and the buildings, the utility and these type of venues?
Well, first, in defense of El Paso, they didn't have those issues that the rest of Texas
Okay.
had.
Well, I wasn't-
They
yeah.
had prepared appropriately, and they're part of the
That
Western.
was mostly because she was there.
No. They're just close to my heart.
Yeah.
But you're absolutely right, Ash, and I know that at McKinstry, you all have done a lot of work around this too, but the meter is an artificial demarcation point. And while, calling on folks to really reduce load is a tool in our toolbox, and sometimes having that automated, we need to do more. So, for example, Seattle has the law that Ada talked about, and then the state of Washington in 2019 actually passed a Clean Buildings Act too, and that requires that buildings meet certain performance standards, right? Because if a building is more efficient, a kilowatt not generated is the best kind that we have, right? It's the cleanest. And what we realized when this law was passed is a lot of folks, because this isn't their day job, didn't understand about going about, making their buildings meet these standards, reducing the energy that their buildings need. So we partnered with a consultant who helped us go out and talk to our customers about how to do these things, and in fact do virtual scans of their buildings. We had a 4-month-long virtual training class for people and then individual coaching sessions. And of those who participated, a full 50% went ahead and participated in our energy efficiency programs. So that's a huge part of it. Something down the road that isn't proven as much yet, as Ada was talking about, and I fully agree on, we've got to dip our toe in those waters, but we can't throw everything into that, can create financial ruin, but is really using the building as a source as well as a sink. And you, Ash, and Dean from McKinstry as well, and I've spent a lot of time talking about that. It's kind of think about electric vehicles, for example. We can use them to give energy back to the grid and then, take energy from the grid as well. A building, and especially if they're built to do that in the first instance, can be really efficient at that as well.
Yeah, good. Yeah, and I appreciate the good work that PSC is doing in other utilities across the country, but I think we are on the forefront of needing to have kind of a bidirectional relationship between supply and load. Ada, talking about partnerships a little bit, and we just talked about it as it relates to the utilities who already have partnerships with the built environment, but to get different outcomes and to maybe even evolve different business models, how do you see business models needing to evolve to drive the change, to kind of push the envelope? I mean, what kinds of things do you think we should all be thinking about relative to different business modalities and partnerships?
Well, I would say generally you've got to think about it from the very, very beginning. You've got to incorporate sustainability and electrification in your early design process. I mean, of course, we're sitting in the cathedral where they did that from the very beginning. And so we use an integrated design process where, sustainability is, one of the very first areas where we set our, upfront goals. We look at sourcing materials from close by. We look at, how much carbon is embodied in the, in the building we produce, and then of course ultimately it's long-term operating performance. And those are all, many are measurable. Certainly not everything is measurable, but the tools to measure those things are better. I think the architecture industry is really pushing the envelope, and developers like ourselves are, moving forward and trying to make good decisions as we do the design up front. It is much more complicated once you have a building that you've got to retrofit, because there's a very material cost challenge there. And again, I'm going to pivot back to, the more incentives that are out there, the more likely you're going to have people willing to adopt new investments and pursue new technologies to get us where we need to go. I don't think there's enough incentives today, whether that's local, state, or federal incentives. And we know incentives work. Everybody understands incentives work. So I would advocate for more incentives and more piloting new technologies for people who are able to take, better position to take those risks, i.e. the public sector.
Yeah, good point about the incentives. I know that the federal government through the IRA program is starting to better define the programs, the incentives they might have available, and we hope that as that continues to show itself in more clarity, that will be a boost. Hey, we're almost out of time, so this is the lightning round. Ada, what kind of leaders do we need?
You need leaders that are willing to take a risk. I mean, you don't want to jump off the high dive and find there's no water in the pool, but you need to get up on the low diving board and be willing to take a measured risk to move the needle here. And we're proud of our track record in terms of being able to do that.
And as you should be. Mary, what do you think? What kind of leaders?
So since we're talking to sports folks, I actually say this to my team all the time, but we need to leave it all on the field. And we need leaders who are willing to leave it all on the field and who recognize that this isn't about us or our own egos. This is about something that impacts every person and creature on the planet.
I hope you all enjoyed the conversation as much as I did. Please, if you will, thank you so much and give these two a round of applause. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And I hope you all enjoy the conference. Hey, Norm.
Hey, thank you guys so much.
Thanks for having us.